Hello and welcome to everyone for joining a really popular topic, which feels odd as a LIMS or ELN provider or salesperson, which is 5 reasons not to invest in a LIMS. A little bit funny to me that this is one of the more popular webinars we've ever hosted. But obviously, we hope that today is going to be really useful for you guys to learn. Quite frankly, as people that sell or are in the business of providing the service, something that we recognized is, we interface with a ton of companies, but you guys often only interface with 1 or 2, maybe 3 providers. So our knowledge of what doesn't work is way greater than the knowledge that you guys have about what doesn't work. So I'm going to share those and obviously talk to you a little bit about ways that we've seen those issues be addressed. It wouldn't be a complete presentation if I just said, here are 5 reasons you shouldn't invest. Clearly, that would be a little bit unfortunate for everyone that attended, and we got a really big group. So we're going to get started. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see that. I'm assuming that's we can see it. Maybe a raise hand or a chat just to confirm. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate those folks for paying attention. Just as a matter of housekeeping, we want to keep this live, interactive. Q&A is available in your Zoom options. Feel free to chat me. I'm alone running the show today, so if I don't get to your chat immediately, don't worry, I will get there. So folks, we're going to start this. Oftentimes webinars are wait until the very end to get to the punchline. We're going to go the exact opposite route. I'm going to name the 5 reasons that you should not invest in a LIMS right out of the gate. And then I'm going to specifically talk about ways that your company could try to address those 5 things in the subsequent slides. So without further ado, let's go into the 5 reasons. Number 1 is a lack of strategy. Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to do with a LIMS? Number 2, lack of a champion network. Steering committee is another term that you guys have probably heard. You need people that are on your team that are working with you to get this across the finish line, even in a small way. Speaking of small ways, a lack of a proof of value or piloting framework for potential vendors. This is one that even if you have a great strategy and even if you have advocates within your organization, without the ability to pilot solutions, you're going to have a lot of paperwork created, but not necessarily a lot of results, and certainly a lack of tangible evidence that this was beneficial to your company. The third thing, a lack of keyword external transparency. You can have all of the strategy in the world internally. You can have great advocates. You can have a POV or a pilot framework. But if you're not willing to share how you're trying to change your organization with those potential partners, you're going to have a hard time finding the solution for you. And then number 5, a really big one from our side. We have a lot of our R&D folks on the line today, a lot of folks from applications and formulating, but a lack of IT buy-in, especially if you're at an organization that's north of 100 million in revenue. If you don't have IT bought in that champion network, or at a minimum as a conversation partner, you're gonna have a really hard time justifying an investment in a LIMS. So just as a matter of introduction, I know many of you know us. This is going to be super short. So, I think it's justified in saying, who are we to be giving you this input? And that's the point of these first couple of slides. So Alchemy is a software as a service company that sells electronic lab notebook, LIMS, and AI tools for formulation focused companies. And our legacy is in the specialty chemicals space as well as in management consulting. Our application is built to bring concepts and chemistry formulation ideas into reality in less than 60 days using a graphical user interface that allows you to map not only your business processes, but your technical specs one-to-one, so that you can achieve the business goals of working smarter, moving faster, and winning more business. And then finally, where are we operating? So we're really fortunate today to have folks joining. I think last count was 18 countries are on the line today. So some people are doing a really late night. Some people are doing an early morning. We really appreciate you guys joining in with us. We have organizations similar to yours. So we saw the sort of the layout of the folks joining today that are working with Alchemy. So we really do have a perspective on, of course, what makes this successful, but also what can make this unsuccessful. And we're going to talk about those now. So when it comes to a strategy, one of the ways that an organization can easily assess do we or do we not have a strategy is answering the following question. Can we articulate what we're trying to do with a LIMS implementation, right? Many people have to unfortunately say, no, do not despair. We are here to give some advice and some guidance on that. So we find that there's nothing better to wrap a strategy around than a visionary statement, right? So obviously, please don't take these next three examples as this is the strategy. This is a vision, but a vision helps to congeal people, steering committees, champions, IT around an idea. So I'm going to give you three different examples of a vision statement, one being aspirational. So an aspirational vision statement that can help to drive the creation of a strategy is something to the effect of a system connecting disparate lab data in a unified, leverageable format is the future of R&D. Right? And then of course, a really snazzy looking photo. You need the snazzy photo or it doesn't work. You build a strategy around achieving this goal. This is the what. Now you got to talk about the how. How are we going to do that? An analytical vision, right? So an analytical vision could look more like this. Legacy software tools were not designed to create lab operating efficiency or harness AI's power. Can we get people to agree to that, right? That's typically a really good test of a vision statement is, can we get people to have consensus around this thing being true or this thing being desirable to achieve? I think many of you know, if you even have an ELN or an existing LIMS, that those tools were not built to be holistic in their scope for helping connect and coagulate the information inside of the technical functions of your organization. And this is the type of vision statement, again, depending on your audience, that may help to motivate, okay, should we wrap a strategy around this? And then the third is a very tactical vision, right? So we had our aspirational, we had a little bit more of an analytical, and now we're talking tactical. Digitizing R&D data capture and streamlining our processes would drive measurable impact. And it would do so in the following 5 ways, right? Again, can we get people to unify behind these messages? I think a really nice litmus test is, do we think streamlined execution is important? Do we think we could make better decisions? Obviously, some of these questions I'm asking to the audience are a bit rhetorical, but sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes they're not rhetorical in that you really need to say, okay, this is a template. What if streamlined execution is the least of our concerns, but there's something that's not on this list that organization XYZ could really benefit from and get value or leverage from? Put it in. Let that be the thing that helps to drive organizational commitment and then the creation of a strategy. If you don't have a why, the what, a LIMS, doesn't matter. You need the why. And here are 3 examples of whys for different types of audiences. A champion network. Even with a great strategy, a great vision statement, and then a great strategy, let's talk a little bit about that champion network. This one's super short and super simple. I had written down on my notes, and this is obviously, leaning back on my history in the industry, but if you have a capital planning organization within your company, and if you're a paint company, if you're a cosmetics company, if you're a specialty supplier, if you're any adhesives organization, you guys have plants, you have manufacturing facilities. Get with your capital budget folks and ask them, how in the heck do you guys build $300 million plants? They know how to project manage, and they can teach you a lot about how to get consensus around a goal. This is a really, really simple framework, but I think there's a lot to unpack in here, right? Which is, What is a steering committee? So some of you guys, of course, I'm being redundant in telling you what a steering committee is, but others, you really may not know. And we've recognized that there are really smart chemists that we talk to that just don't know. It can't just be one individual that believes the lab can operate more efficiently that drives this change. You need to get organizational level commitment at the VP level or up, all the way up to the C-suite, to drive this change through. You need to have a project team. Now that project team, some companies, if you're making $50 billion a year, like some people on the line, you don't need to have a project team as large as they may have. But on the flip side, just because you make $50 billion a year doesn't mean you need to have a project team of 50 people. Project teams are really effective in the 3 to 5 people range. You need to have users represented inside of this group. You need to have experts, meaning formulating experts, R&D experts, process experts, quality experts. And then, of course, you need your business owners. You need the people that not only can write the check, but that can assess the strategic impact that making an investment like this would have for your organization. So again, we're going to provide these templates to you guys at the end of the call. And it doesn't mean that this is 100% perfect, but starting with the framework like this helps you understand what are the things, once we have that strategy, that we need to put in place to really show people, hey, we need your time around this vision and around this strategy. Here's what the investment looks like, and here's how you would really get value out of it yourself. Typically, it's a good idea to show people how they would get value from something to get them to be on your team and to help you. A piloting framework. All of these 5 are really crucial, and I don't like to play favorites. I think, number 1 is number 1 for a reason. If you don't have a strategy, a why, the what really doesn't matter. But this piloting framework, I think there's so much here, and unfortunately, it's so difficult for companies of a certain size. Here I'm thinking in that 500 million to 1 billion and up type of level in turnover. You guys really struggle to just test things, to start small, think big, and scale fast. And if you don't begin to open your mindset to that, I think you're going to have a lot of missing I's dotted and missing T's crossed, because you need to establish an ability to start with a use case, start with something that you want to try, and then begin. Actually put time, people, money. Yes, money. Money helps to drive consensus around this being a worthwhile use case. And then once you've actually been able to expand and optimize that solution, look at use case 2. Look at use case 3. I cannot stress enough, right, from my experience building or helping build the digitalization group within Avonic, for doing this for more than 2 years now, the importance of starting somewhere with a use case in mind. It doesn't mean perfection in mind, but a use case in mind, and then scaling up progressively. And I think on the flip side, and this is a way, sometimes I like to put myself in the shoes of a partner, right, of you guys, and say, how can I spin this as a positive for my organization and not just a little win for the LIMS vendor we're working with? The right type of partner will be able to work with you on specific use cases and deliver value. If this partner that you're vetting doesn't have the capability to let you test, they probably aren't the right type of partner for you for a long-term engagement. Similarly, if you're vetting organizations and they're not able to provide a framework for the way that you could pilot with them, meaning what are the steps that have to happen before we're able to sign a pilot agreement of 3, 6, 9 months? What are the things that have to happen? What information do you need from us? But if your organization is unwilling to invest some time and some energy into creating these frameworks, we simply see that our closed won rate, right, which we track as a growing organization, goes down for organizations that don't have these types of frameworks. And again, we're going to provide this because there's nothing really secretive about it. We just hope that the organizational thrust to be able to make these changes is possible. And then lastly, right, and this is a really big one, both for the vendor, like the potential vendor that you're working with, but also for you guys. there need to be goals and objectives. And a lot of you have heard of SMART, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive or time boxed. You need to have these goals documented before you even begin a pilot. So people often mistake that a pilot means willy-nilly, reckless, just kind of throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And that's not what it is. It unfortunately can be what it is if you guys allow it to be. But these types of objectives, again, with specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time boxed goals, really help to give that steering committee, your leadership, and the vendor something to really work toward and achieve in the course of a 3-month pilot. So these are just examples, guys. I'm going to be providing this, as I said, in detail later, but I'm just providing you examples of the types of things that can be agreed upon up front in advance of any type of contractual event, so that in order to get that 1, 2, 3-year commitment from my leadership, I need to prove in the pilot, which will last X amount of time, that these things were done, they were completed, they were successful. And if they weren't, why weren't they? Right? So executives don't always need 100% completion and perfection. A lot of times what we've understood is leadership is just looking for an explanation as to why. And sometimes we got 85% of the way there, and here's why we were lacking the 15%. That type of clarity really helps to identify what will help us be successful in a year, 2 or 3-year type of engagement with this organization. So bear that in mind. There should be goals all the way from the piloting stage, and certainly in a full-scale deployment, there should be stated business objectives of what you're trying to achieve even before a pilot would start. But you need to write them down, and they need to be documented and shared with the vendor as well as with your internal team. Transparency. So obviously I'm sort of driving at this notion of transparency a little bit. And, one of my former leaders told me, der das schreibt, bleibt, which means in German, he who writes remains. And the reality is that all of that documentation, all of the things that I've shown you up to this point, if you're not willing to work with your third-party potential partners and actually show them what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, yes, put MNDAs in place, put protections in place, protect your people's time. But in order to get, you have to give. That's something that we learn as salespeople, but I think that's also something that you guys very well know as scientific development organizations. To get that next new novel resin that has low or no VOC, you need to partner with those companies that are helping you create the solution. And the same is true of IT tools. This is a really big thing for us. We see that you can have great documentation, but if you're not willing to sit down with the vendor for, yes, hours on end, this is a big investment. And by big investment, I don't just mean sort of what my slide a few ones back said. It's not just about the capital. It's not just about the money. It's about the time and the organizational capital that you're spending to get these types of things implemented and get them done. Certain vendors are faster in implementing than others, but you should be willing to sit down with a partner and say, here's where we are today. Here's what we're doing from a systems perspective. Here are our strategic objectives. We want to bring better products to market faster. Is not a secret, guys. It's not a secret. We want to have no or low VOC coatings or low or no VOC resins, or we want to have the most color fast pigments in the world. None of this is a secret to any of the vendors that you're working with, but you got to open up, because that helps that vendor show that they can be strategic in solving your business challenges. I think, something from our side that we recognize, and we really pride ourselves on this, is we are very willing to invest time, effort, energy with partners to really brainstorm and to think out loud about what are you trying to achieve. And I really think that the right type of partner will actually bring approaches to you as a potential buyer, as a potential partner. They will bring structure to help you answer those tough questions that you may not have answers to already. I think it's a great way to vet companies or potential partners beyond their technology, is to say, how did their people or their processes enable us to get to better, more clarifying answers to our questions? And the best vendors in the world, especially in this space, they will bring these types of offerings, such as an Envision workshop like Alchemy has. And then, it's like, what is the outcome? What is the output? Obviously, your steering committee or your leadership is going to say, well, why are you spending so much time with this vendor? And the reality is that you're spending that time so that they can create, no different than a consulting organization, a PwC or an Accenture or a McKinsey. You need to spend time with them so that they can provide you a recommendation of future path forward. And this is just an example of, here's across all the departments, many of these departments, I hope that a lot of you are familiar with, or you're in the wrong webinar. You can actually get solution roadmaps like this that could be obviously tailored with your company's logos and your company's colors, but they can then be presented to your steering committee. Maybe the biggest message here is, the vendors in this space, and Alchemy is not the only one, we can really help you articulate your vision and articulate your goal. But if you can't share with us, it's really hard for us to throw darts at a wall and guess what your strategy is, because the strategies, despite everyone being a specialty chemical company or a coating company or a pigment company, the strategies are in fact very different. And then lastly, IT buy-in. IT buy-in, like I said, it can truly and has been for us a crux. If we have all of the other four things, if at the 11th hour IT steps in and says, oh, by the way, here's this questionnaire that no one on the internal team has ever seen, or certainly the vendor has never seen, and it contains things like, I'm not going to make up anything because I'll expose myself as not an IT expert. That can really ruin these deals from a pilot phase or from a larger deployment phase. It is not too much to ask. Many of you all, we know who's on this webinar today. Many of you all have IT teams, and they for sure work with many, many vendors beyond LIMS. They work with CRM vendors or ERP vendors. Heck, they even work with vendors that supply you raw materials to produce your ingredients or production capability in the plants. They have security questionnaires. This is an example of one that we actually share as a reference. So, we are very capable of saying, hey, here are the 17 things that we as an IT organization feel are really important. Would your IT team like to add to this list? But really bear in mind, there is an and at the end of this title. If you're going to ask IT to partner, you also, as the business owner or the champion or the subject matter expert, you also have to be willing to do some work to say, what are the things that I'm looking to do from a system requirements perspective, right? So this is, again, something that Alchemy does. We work with organizations and say, hey, what are, and this is obviously one section of a 7-section document that's like 70 rows long and hard to put on a slide. But you guys need to be capable of saying, okay, you provided IT with the starting point, provide us with a starting point, but there has to be a feedback loop. And then lastly, how are you guys vetting and comparing comparative vendors, right? So have a selection criteria, have a weighting criteria, I should say. Security matters X percentage, team and deliverabilities matter Y percentage, product and ease of use matter Z percentage. But it is very, very possible. And here's an example, right? So 7 different categories or 8 different categories with various weights that can allow you to say, okay, in a seemingly convoluted, unanswerable environment, how do I compare these different solutions across these 5, 6, 7 pillars that really matter a lot to us? Further, I think another really common thing that we see for engaged and successful IT teams is they're able to provide frameworks that help to communicate what is my business team looking for versus what are our IT requirements, right? And this is it may look complex, but if there's anyone from IT on the call, you can give me a thumbs up or raise a hand. I'm happy to hear that this is not crazy. they should be producing and helping you guys articulate as business folks or as folks in the lab. They should say, here's what we from an IT perspective would view as the ideal technical solution to the data management problem that we're trying to address. Again, connecting back to strategy. But it is really not too much to ask IT to get involved. And this, for me, it really ties into that idea of having an internal steering committee or an internal championship network. IT should be in that process early on, especially if you have a real IT team. So if you're one of those companies 500 million and up, you probably have 10-ish employees in IT. Get one of them to be a named business partner with you, and really help to work and bring a certain level of technical expertise. You don't know everything as an R&D chemist or as an R&D leader of a global team, and especially not everything about IT systems. And what I can verify is that a LIMS is very much so the amalgamation of a technical competence from an R&D perspective and a chemistry perspective, but also quite a lot of knowledge from a systems perspective and a data management perspective. So that's all that we have today. I really nailed it right on the time. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. The Q&A is live. I'd be more than glad to take any questions that folks have. As I said, I will be following up with a recording of this webinar, as well as with the slides that were provided. Because like I said, it's not enough just to say, here are the problems. We want to provide some actionable ways and some leverageable templates that you guys could put into operation to say, hey, we're missing that strategy. We're missing that IT buy-in or that steering committee. None of this is secret. But I think because some of this is a lot of closed door, it may feel like it's proprietary when it's not. If there are any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A. If not, really appreciate you guys joining today, and hopefully you found it really useful and insightful, and happy to follow up with any additional questions that you may have.